Hey everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Linux and Open Source News Show. This week we've got the release of GIMP3, finally after 7 years, with a lot of really good features in there. We also have Firefox adding, slowly, web app support back, even though it's still not as good as you might want to see it, and it's still only in the nightly builds. We also have the release of GNOME 48 and a lot of cool stuff around SteamOS, including the very first SteamOS powered device that is not from Valve, now available on pre-order, and it's not that expensive. So anyway, let's get started with this right after I tell you about our sponsor, Proton Mail. They've been a sponsor of the channel for a long time now. I think it's been 2 years, and you probably know what they do. They offer you an email address that is end-to-end encrypted and zero access encrypted, meaning even Proton employees can't access your encrypted communication. On top of that, your Proton Mail account gives you access to all the features you need to secure your email account to avoid phishing, spams, and scams, and you also get an entire suite. You've got Proton Drive included, Proton Calendar, you've got a free VPN, you've got a password manager, you've got your contacts. It's an entire suite. Now, of course, you can create your account for free, but if you need more storage and more features, they have paid plans. I use the Proton suite for my personal email address and all related personal information and documents. I have the Proton Mail Plus plan, but of course there is something for everyone in there. The link, as usual, is in the description of the video. Okay, so GIMP 3.0 is finally out. After years and years of development, 7 years to be precise, GIMP 3 using GTK3 is out. And yes, it's GTK3, not GTK4, but that doesn't matter much because it comes with a lot of changes, as you'd expect. So first, the UI will scale a lot better on high DPI displays, meaning your fractional scaling will be followed correctly. Tablet drawing is also much better supported. Themes for GIMP are now CSS based, so customization of the interface should be a lot easier outside of the usual GTK3 themes. And GIMP 3 now supports Wayland natively, so no need for X-Wayland anymore to run it. A bunch of UI-related issues that were not fixable in the GTK2 version are also now addressed, and the best feature they added is non-destructive filters, meaning you can remove one filter you applied to a layer without removing all the filters you applied since. And so you can undo steps individually instead of undoing everything up to the point you actually wanted to undo. This means you can also merge the filters, toggle them on or off individually, and more. These filters are of course stored in the XCF file format for GIMP. GIMP also supports RGB color profiles, and it has the base work done for CMYK and LAB color modes. There's a new welcome dialog to either create a new project or change settings. You can organize layers more easily and select multiple layers at the same time. You can expand the layer as you paint in it, even outside the canvas. You can change more keyboard shortcuts. There are a bunch of file formats that are now supported on top of the ones GIMP already handled. The text tool works much better with various fonts, and you can now add text outlines or shadows without turning your text layer into an image, meaning you can then edit the text and retain the shadows on the new text you just typed, which is really nice. Basically, the TLDR is it adds a lot of stuff that people really wanted to see in GIMP, especially people coming from Photoshop, which really felt those features were missing. Well, they're not missing anymore. The UI might still feel confusing to someone used to Photoshop, but if you're just starting with a brand new graphics design tool, GIMP is now as good as it comes. Now, Firefox is finally adding support for web apps again, after years of discontinuing this feature, which was pretty strange as a move for Firefox. PWA support can now be turned back on in nightly builds, except it's still very experimental and it currently won't do anything because the feature is not complete, but the flag is there, indication that Firefox will at some point gain support back for progressive web apps. And it should happen quickly because Firefox seems to be moving a bit faster than it used to release new features to the stable versions of the browser. Progressive web apps will still show the entire web browser interface. Unfortunately, most other browsers generally just remove all the toolbar, you just have a title bar around the website, which is generally a better way of handling that. Firefox will not do that, but at the very least you'll be able to launch those web apps like normal applications from your menu, from your dock, from your taskbar, or whatever else you use to launch applications. The applications will remain open until you voluntarily close them. Closing the browser outside of the web app will not close the web apps themselves, and any link that you click in the web browser that points to the website that the web app handles will be open in that web app instead of being open in a new browser tab or a new window. So you won't have too much clutter with the web app being open and then some tabs of the exact same website being open as well in the browser. I think that's really nice. Web app support should never really have been removed from Firefox. It made no sense for the browser focusing on the web as the platform to remove the ability to create apps from websites. It still feels like a really early first draft, but it is still experimental and not in the stable version. Hopefully they go back on that. Let's show the entire web browser interface, because it makes things way harder to differentiate when you have an expose view of your windows. It's hard to tell which one is a web app and which one is an actual web browser window if they all have the exact same tab bar and tab interface. So hopefully they go back on that and they remove all that browser interface in the future, but it's still good to see Firefox going back on that, because that's a basic feature. Now, GNOME 48 was released this week as well. I already made a video about it. You might have watched it. It's on the YouTube channel and on the PeerTube channel. But if you did not watch that video, the TLDR is that this is a big release, bigger than GNOME had in a long time. You get experimental HDR support that did not show up for me on my HDR display or TV, but some people managed to make it work. You get battery charging limits if your hardware supports it, so you can limit the charge of the battery to 80% so it doesn't get used up too quickly. You get a new font that looks much better based on Inter. You get tweaked colors and rounded corners everywhere. You get stacked notifications that are grouped per application, which is a lot easier to navigate as well. You've got support for global keyboard shortcuts, so the screen reader now works properly on Wayland, and any app that you run minimized and invoke using keyboard shortcuts will now work properly on Wayland as well. You also get some very solid performance improvements, notably triple buffering support, so GNOME will be smoother on older GPUs. You've got image editing capabilities in the image editor. You've got digital well-being settings to remind you to take breaks when you're sitting in front of your PC for hours. You get a new audio player app, an updated text editor, and an update to a lot of the core GNOME apps. Now, it is truly a massive update, and you can expect more for the future releases because there are a lot of the Sovereign Tech Foundation projects that are funded by this organization that haven't landed yet in GNOME. So there are some pretty big things coming for GNOME 49, maybe GNOME 50. And as always, when I review a new version of GNOME, I'm reminded that I do really enjoy KDE for all the features it offers me, but also, the look and feel of GNOME is, in my opinion at least, unsurpassed in the Linux world, but also on any desktop operating system, in my opinion. Now, if you remember the Pebble smartwatch, which was one of the only and first open source project for smartwatches, well, there's another one coming. It's called Repebble. It's another company trying to redo these open source smartwatches, and they just announced two new models. The Core 2 Duo, which really needs to change the name because it has to be a trademark from Intel, and the Core Time 2. The Core 2 Duo is basically the classic Pebble 2 that started it all, but with more recent hardware, a better e-paper display, water resistance, and a stated 30-day battery life, which is awesome, and it will ship in July for $149. Now, the other model, the Core Time 2, is bigger and it uses an e-paper display as well, but a color one instead of the black and white of the Core 2 Duo. It's also a touchscreen, it has the same 30-day battery life, plus a heart rate monitor, a barometer, a compass, and the complications that Apple Watch users can already enjoy, so basically showing real-time data on the watch face, and you can just tap that data to get access to the details, basically mini widgets. It will arrive in December for $225. these will all use Pebble OS, an open source system that has all the current options you could already use if you have a device that runs Pebble OS. I'm not sure if these still exist today. You will also get a companion app for Android and iOS to manage all this, although the developers already said that the iOS version will not give you a lot of features because obviously Apple is extremely restrictive and gives their Apple Watch much more preference and much more capabilities than they give anyone else. I'm not a big smartwatch guy. I do prefer basic fitness trackers because the smartwatch just has terrible battery life generally. Like, you have to charge it every day or every 2 days, and that's just too annoying for me. It also turned me into a data obsessed and crazed person who really could not focus on anything other than using every single feature that the health app or the smartwatch had, which just wasn't for me. I do understand the appeal though, and a 30-day battery life open source powered smartwatch might actually be pretty interesting. I do prefer regular old dumb watches though. Now, if there is one thing that the current international political situation has done, is bringing countries in the EU closer together and maybe even pushing EU-based companies to launch new initiatives. And this is what we're seeing right now. The EU is pushing to have their own EuroStack for software, independent from solutions made in the US. Various companies like Airbus, OVH Cloud, Marina, Nextcloud, even Proton, which is based in Switzerland, not in the EU, and other companies, they've all submitted an open letter to the European Commission to push for more political support for EU-based solutions, from applications, platforms, AI models, chips, computing, storage, and everything else. The message is really clear. If we don't want to be subject to the whims of changing governments from the US, we can't keep relying on their solutions, and we need to push for EU-based solutions. So these companies define this thing as the EuroStack, and as they define it, it would push the public sector to buy European instead of relying on the current US-based solutions. But there's no mandate on excluding any non-EU player. The goal would be to make EU-based solutions that actually work and are packaged all together, because that's not the case right now, and also giving incentives to actually use those solutions from the EU instead of relying on Microsoft, Apple, Google, and the like. Now, we're talking about subsidies here, so obviously it's not for the good of Europe or European citizens. It's more grabbing public funds and giving them to the private sector, which is always what companies want to see. But if it's for subsidizing open source projects, I'm not really against it. Like, public funds should go to public projects that are open source. No problems here for me. Now, these companies are also pushing to pool resources between countries. They're also pushing for interoperability and for open source solutions, which I like quite a bit. Some are calling for a sovereign fund investing in EU-based startups. Some are floating ideas like having a mandatory 50 to 80% open source-based infrastructure in a few years. But generally, the consensus seems to be, let's slowly try and replace the solutions we can replace with EU-made solutions that are open source. And I think it's a great idea, honestly. If this is the push we need to actually fund open source software development, if it has to come from the EU, then it comes from the EU. I have no issues with that. It's not even about replacing solutions from the US, it's replacing solutions from big tech companies that do things in closed source format, or at least keep very, very tight control on their open source stuff. If we can avoid that and actually fund good, open, collaborative open source projects, well, I think the EU is a good driver for that, and I would be very happy to see that happen. Of course, right now, it's only EU-based companies, and it's not the EU itself pushing for that, so there's no telling if this will go anywhere. Now let's conclude on some gaming related stuff. First, the SteamOS version of the Lenovo Legion Go S is now available for pre-order, at least in the US from Best Buy. It's the first third-party device running SteamOS, which is pretty big because depending on its adoption or its lack thereof, this could mean very big things for SteamOS. If the device is very popular, more manufacturers will want to build SteamOS-based devices. But if the device is not very popular and no one buys it, it could also mean that SteamOS remains in a cupboard and never actually succeeds, which would be really bad for Linux gaming. Now there are some good arguments to go for the SteamOS based version instead of the Windows based version, and namely the price point, the access price point is way less expensive for the SteamOS device. It starts at $549 for 500 gigs of storage and 16 gigs of RAM and a Ryzen Z2 Go CPU, meaning that this model has an entry price $200 cheaper than the Windows powered version, because this Windows version only comes with a 1TB storage plus 32 gigs of RAM configuration, which is probably way too high for a handheld. You should have an entry-level price point, and that entry-level price point is the SteamOS version. But the SteamOS version can go up to these specs. For $749, you can get that terabyte of storage and those 32 gigs of RAM, plus a Z1 Extreme CPU from AMD instead of the Z2 Go, the Z1 Extreme being more powerful. Now, the first look at the Windows version of that hardware praised the hardware. They said the controls were really nice, it was super comfortable, the display was good, the performance was really decent. The only thing people hated was Windows 11 because, well, it's a terrible operating system on a PC and it's even worse on a handheld. So the SteamOS version fixes the major complaint, but also it costs a lot less money. We'll have to see if people elect to buy this one or not, but it does have its chances, I think. And still on SteamOS, the latest Assassin's Creed game is marked as verified on Steam Deck, and judging from a little test done by Gaming on Linux, it seems to actually deserve its verified status. It runs at around 30 FPS with a few drops here and there under that, but generally the experience is reported as being very smooth, very enjoyable to play on the default settings. Battery life is apparently atrocious, it doesn't last more than an hour, so really not good, but this is par for the course for recent AAA titles on the Steam Deck. Ubisoft said that they would provide further graphics options on the Steam Deck to optimize things a bit more. As per playing that game on desktop Linux, if you have an AMD GPU, you're safe. If you like those games, you can buy it and play it. But if you have an Nvidia GPU, the game will just freeze before you reach the main menu, so not playable. It's a known bug in the Nvidia drivers. You need to wait for a workaround or install the latest Nvidia developers beta drivers, which I would not recommend you do. Wait for a fix in Proton or VKD3D. This generally happens pretty fast for big name AAA titles. The reviews of that game seem pretty positive right now on Steam, but they always are in the first week. After that, people that are not the absolute biggest fans of a game series come up, start the game, they are generally a bit more critical and point out the issues a bit more severely, and this balances out. I'll wait for actual long-form reviews on this game because I really did not like the latest formula of Assassin's Creed. I liked Origins, but Odyssey really turned me off. I felt it was completely pointless, gigantic with mindless activities. Story was terrible. I just did not enjoy my time with it. And this looks like it's more of the same, and I don't even really like the setting in feudal Japan, so we'll see. I'll wait for reviews and we'll see if it's for me. I don't think it is, though. If you like that game, though, you can play it on your Linux PC or the deck, provided your Linux PC doesn't have an Nvidia GPU, of course. Now, whether you like Nvidia GPUs or AMD GPUs, though, our sponsor has you covered. It's Tuxedo Computers. So by now, there is no chance you don't know who they are, at least if you've ever listened to one episode of my YouTube channel or this show. They make laptops and desktops that ship with Linux pre-installed. The main advantage is that you never have to worry whether Linux will run well or whether the hardware will be supported, because everything is picked specifically because it works really well with Linux. They have a big choice of computers for every price point, every need, a lot of customization options. They ship to most countries in the world, and I only use their computers these days for all my work-related stuff and all my gaming. So as always, if you need a new computer, if you want to support a company that actually contributes to Linux, click the link in the description and get a Tuxedo computer. They're really good. So thank you all for watching the video. You know where all the usual YouTube buttons are. Click them so YouTube notices me and makes the channel grow a little bit. And I guess, well, thank you all for listening and watching, and you'll see me in the next one. Bye!